Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Kober, one of the co-producers of CME Palooza, and I would like to welcome you to the anchor session of CME Palooza Spring 2024. This session is called Behind the Scenes with CME, Enhancing Learner Engagement with Dynamic Design and Activated and Inclusive Digital Spaces. This session is sponsored by Daiichi Sankyo and Platform Q Health. Our moderator for this session is Jill Harrison-Snyder. Jill is the project manager and alchemist at DKB Med. So as with all of our CME Palooza sessions, I would like to start off by, thanking our sponsors. Our gold sponsors, Haymarket Medical Education, Med Learning Group, and Projects in Knowledge. Our silver sponsors, Academic CME, Clinical Education Alliance, Daiichi Sankyo, DKB Med, Helio CME, Integrity Continuing Education, Medscape Education, Platform Q Health Education, and Talem Health. And finally, our bronze sponsors, Answers in CME, AxDev, Bonum Continuing Education, CMEology, Excalibur Medical Education, GibLib, Global Education Group, Infograph Ed, Integritas Communications, Iridium Continuing Education, Leading Learning, MedIQ, Partners for Advancing Clinical Education, Paradigm Medical Communications, PriMed, Peerview Institute for Medical Education, Vindico Medical Education, and Wright Medicine. So as with all of our live CME Palooza sessions, there are two ways to ask questions. You can use the Horizon CME text line to send in a question. The number is 267-6660-CME. Or if you are watching this in YouTube, you can enter in questions within the YouTube chat function. We will get to as many questions as we can throughout this session. And we will be using Poll Everywhere, as with all of our CME Palooza sessions. If you have not already downloaded the Poll Everywhere app, and I assume by now pretty much everyone has, join the presentation entitled CME Palooza 005 or type in the URL on this slide into your web browser. Finally, please be aware that the opinions, discussions, and/or conclusions expressed are those of our panelists and do not represent an endorsement by or a position of their employer, its parent, or their affiliates. So with that, we actually have a brief introductory video that I am going to show to get things kicked off.
Thanks so much, Scott. Hello, everyone. As Scott shared, I'm Jill Harrison-Snyder, and I'm thrilled to be the curator and moderator of today's discussion. I wanted to share a little behind the scenes of just the inspiration behind this conversation today. I have worked in a variety of sectors. I started in CME when I first graduated college many years ago, and then found my way back and have collected throughout time these observations that there are three tenets that really inspire a sense of meaningful and inclusive and dynamic connection, no matter the sector. And I see it a great deal here in CME. And it's those tenets being that we'll speak about today are envisioning, building, and engaging. And so we have four panelists with us today that are going to be speaking to those tenets in a variety of different ways. We have some different ways in, if you will, one even being a mock program that we're working on together. But really, we're looking to have our panelists share with all of you, and then we look forward to hearing from all of you in the ARS questions, is how we collaborate and connect to create a dynamic way of engaging with each other and with learners. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Bavel if she would introduce herself.
Thanks, Jill. I'm Bavel Shah. I am president and co-founder at Infograph Ed. At InfographiC, I head up the creative and scientific team. We have a group of science designers, as we call them, who are a hybrid of creatives who have had a first degree in biological science as well as a master's in biomedical visualization. So they are very, very suited for the kind of work that we do. And it's been great to be part of this panel. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you, Pavel. Charlotte?
Hi, my name is Charlotte Dixon. I am one of the pharmacy contract managers at Oxygen Health, but I also have a unique role of leading community engagement and outreach, both at my facility where I work at, but also in my church and community here in New Orleans, Louisiana. So thank you, Jill, for having me today.
Thank you. Anna?
My name is Anna Muhlenhaupt. I am on the business development side at DKB Med. So on the business development side, we kind of do all the program planning and looking at how to collaborate with people like Pavel and Charlotte and Paul. And then when we get a grant funded, we turn it over to Jill and her team, and they do a fantastic job of actually making those partnerships really come to life.
Thank you, Anna. And Paul?
Hi there, I'm Paul Ullman. I'm an independent video producer and director, and for many years I've been working with DKB Med to help them implement their medical education, whether on stage or as videos or as CME. And my job is to take the raw materials and try to make them be the way DKB Med wants them and needs them, and to be the most effective.
Thank you so much, Paul. So it's time for our first ARS question. We'd love to hear about your backgrounds, where you're all coming from. So we'll take a beat. And Scott, if you could bring that up. Great. This looks dynamic in its own right. It looks like folks are like making choices. Well, maybe that, maybe not. We are multitudes. This is great. Okay, great. Thank you all for sharing. I'd like to point to I would be curious to hear what what folks define as other, because another component about this conversation and the why with these four panelists specifically is developing CME and being inspired by outside CME work to create that sense of dynamic and engagement collaboration. So my first question to our panelists, how are you inspired by outside CME experiences to develop dynamic and engaging CME programs? So who would like to go first? And I'll carry that with, how are you inspired? And then also how have you used your outside experiences to inform your work in CME?
I'm happy to start if you like, Jill.
Yes, please.
So one of my biggest influences, and I speak quite openly about this, is I love to look at what others are doing in the infographics and interactivity space. So I am always looking at what New York Times is doing, The Guardian is doing, how they're putting out articles and important information in this day and age, besides just the newspaper, of course. And in these days and ages, we're seeing so much information being passed out, on social media, but also interactive through an online link right there on your phone. And everything is just made to be so much more interactive and exciting to engage with and look at and then read and get the information from. So one of the things I do quite shamelessly is look at what they do and try and adapt those ideas into the work that we're doing here at InfographiC, come up with ideas that I may have seen in those examples and apply them to what we're doing. And then just a bit of background, Jill, since you asked. when I left pharma, I started my art business, and that really did, of course, influence what I'm doing now. And the story of how Karen and I started Infograph Ed is a discussion for another day, but it involved that art business, which then led to this business, and that's the history behind us. So just a little background on myself.
Yes. Thank you, Pavel. And that background, that art background clearly informs the work you're doing now with CME, and couldn't be happening without what you had done before, and how they're married together.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. Paul, I feel like that's a great segue into,
Sure.
the collaboration of art and science. I feel like maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, outside of my CME work, I mean, I'm a filmmaker first and foremost, and so my documentary work is all about finding the story within a huge mass of information and interviews and archival work. But also, as a working playwright, my job is to craft a story that is engaging, and I can't do any of that without collaborating with a great number of people to make that work. And so both of that's sort of, I'm primarily a storyteller no matter what form it takes, but also none of it happens without collaborating, and I think that's the most exciting part, is working with DKB and all their team to find the story in whatever the project happens to be, and then shape that in such a way. And I use all those outside influences to help me make that as good as I can.
Thanks
And
so
just
much.
to,
I feel like that.
yeah, I was just going to jump in on that, because one of the things I think is really important about collaboration, especially in this CME space, is I think in order to bring new ideas to the fold and to keep things fresh and to keep us moving ahead and moving forward, being able to look outside of the realm of CME into places where people have artistic talent and things like that can really help us find that new niche. So with Paul's ability to create a story and tell a story, we were able to really jump into sharing patient voices a long time before a lot of other CME groups felt comfortable doing so. And I think you can see in Bavel's experience and what she and Karen have been able to do with Infograph Ed, they were really on the cutting edge of that years ago when they started that out, in the days when we were all still really relying on the very cookie cutter PowerPoint presentations. They made sense of information in a graphic visual way that was able to really clearly convey a message to stakeholders who don't necessarily live and breathe CME and really need that quick delivery of information. And further, to reach out to groups like Charlotte's group and be able to find patients where they're not necessarily getting that day-to-day interaction with clinicians, and maybe that's where we're needed most. And I think that being able to reach outside of the CME landscape in order to do that can really strengthen and take CME to a place where we have just added effectiveness and added impact.
And Anna, just to kind of add and piggyback off your conversation and what you just said, which was great, in terms of being a part of the largest health system here in New Orleans, able to connect with that, then also having the relationship in the respect to in your communities has really shaped looking outside of the box. And I think in this day and time, we have to look outside of the box. And so what really kind of drove that is having that relationship with also working in a pharmacy-driven organization that wants to serve the community, but also, as Jill iterated and Anna, that a lot of times you don't find your necessary people that are going into this hospital system. So sometimes reaching out in your churches, in your community, and connecting with your churches, which is one area that I lead in my churches, serving the community in the health ministry, is to be able to connect members with people like Jill and Anna and those that are putting together these programs to help them, because sometimes there's apprehensions in going into the health system or meeting with your clinician. So where most people you get to connect with their church, they trust their church, they trust their clergy, they trust those people that are in there. So they're more likely to hear and understand and want to see about this program and be able to connect them to resources that sometimes they don't want to do in a hospital setting, or feel like there's that distrust or that mistrust in the health world that we deal with a lot of times. So having to look outside of the box and connect with your community and outreach to your city leaders and involve them and people that they see every day and trust sometimes kind of opens that ramp to make these programs successful.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Thank you all very much for those responses. Some of the things I'm hearing that I also, again, that sense of outside in is the sense of creativity, the use of and also humanity. How are we meaningfully engaging with those we're working with and also providing programming for? And Paul, I love your use of story. And that reminds me so much about, how all of us are coming to this of like how, with Bobble, how do you visually realize a story? Right. And then Charlotte's end of like, how are you delivering that story and sharing that story honestly and safely for a community of people? I have roots in theater, so it always reminds me of an audience, right? How are you inviting an audience into connecting? Because this work is because of them. So without them and without that kind of creativity and awareness and story, we don't have the work. Great. Thank you. So we're going to take a beat here for our next ARS question. And that one is going to come up as soon as I feel like Scott is our Wizard of Oz behind the scenes. Which of these are your primary way in to developing CME programs? So again, those key tenets of envisioning and engaging and developing. Love to hear how you all come to this world. Seeming we've got a lot of determining reach and impact on learners. Yeah. Great. I'm also recognizing that all of these responses really can be a variation on a similar theme and add up to D. Right? Because right back to that, we're meaningful outcomes, meaningful engagement. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So as we continue this conversation along, how do we come to CME and how do we create that sense of meaningful engagement is our second set of questions for the panelists. And this is a scenario that we've created, the sense of a mock RFP that the panelists are going to kind of walk us through again of like how we can see collaboration and action behind the scenes. So a supporter has announced an RFP for a program in diabetes that involves clinician and patient education through community engagement. So Anna, I'm going to ask you to be our producer visionary, kick this off. And then we'll move to our designers and Bobble and Paul, and then Charlotte will bring us to the sense of the engagement with our audiences. Anna.
All right, sure. So we've got this RFP in diabetes, and we're looking to create a program that does some sort of community engagement. So the first thing we're going to do is examine the therapeutic landscape. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be the case with an RFP, because with an RFP, you've already kind of identified the landscape. But what you want to do is you want to see where that treatment is in its life cycle. If you're talking about a treatment that has just hit market or is still in phase 3 clinical trials, that is going to be more of a knowledge-based conversation, right? You want to make sure that people are understanding, especially if it's a new MOA, something like that. You really want to make sure that people understand that from a knowledge base. If it's a little bit further along in its life cycle, what you're looking to do is reach people who may technically have that information available to them, but they're not doing anything with it. So you really want to see what is preventing practice change, what is preventing those outcomes from getting better, improving. And so what you really want to do is see what the reach is. For diabetes, a lot of times it's going to be the primary care audience, right? Endocrinologists, while they do manage complex cases, by and large, especially with the volume of patients with diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, you're going to see that need for primary care to really come in, step up, and take that bigger role in treating there. So you're looking at that. identifying the target audience, and then you're taking that information to design the program. So you start with the gaps, you start with where your landscape is, and then you design the program for there. With primary care especially, you want to develop a program that's going to be engaging for clinicians. They see a lot of free and no cost CME coming to them. So you're going to want to do something that will cut through the noise of a crowded CME landscape. And you're going to want to do that in a way that's not just flashy, it's not just big, it needs to be meaningful. It needs to be engaging in a meaningful way to really deliver the education in a way that is going to change practice. So if we were looking at an RFP where we're looking to do community engagement, where we're looking to do both knowledge transfer and support that practice change, support that change in clinician habits in order to improve patient outcomes, the first thing I'm going to do is look for a trusted partner, because everybody knows RFPs have a limited time. So you want to make sure that you're reaching out to trusted partners who you know are going to be able to get back to you, who you know understand the time frames that need to happen in this situation. So for me, I would reach out to Infograph Ed. I'd look to them and talk to Bobble and her team to see if we can create something that's engaging, but also efficient and effective, that can really allow primary care clinicians to get their education, to get it succinctly, to get it effectively, to be able to take that information and really apply it to practice as quickly as possible to make sure that they're really engaging the patients and getting those patients to a better spot. The second thing I do, I'd probably with something with diabetes, I'd work with Paul. I think that getting patient stories and helping clinicians understand patient perspectives is a really important way to bring a story, bring a narrative, and something more personal and emotional to something that may be a little bit stiff or clinical and may not give clinicians that same pause of, say, engaging in something like shared decision making or really effective interviewing with a patient, making sure that they're getting the right treatment for them, because each patient is different. And I think that sometimes when clinicians are strict to the timelines that they really have to hit for their healthcare systems, may not take the time to think about unless we give them a reason to think about that. And I think that having patients on video can really do that. Thing I would do is reaching out to somebody like Charlotte and seeing if we can work with her healthcare system. One of the big issues in diabetes is you have a lot of patients who are not otherwise engaging with their healthcare system, who's not engaging with their primary care clinicians or any sort of specialist. So they may not know that they have diabetes. And if they do have diabetes, they may not know how to better treat, better care for themselves and work with their clinician in order to do that. A lot of underserved communities see higher rates of diabetes. That includes communities of color, that includes communities below the poverty line. For various reasons, those people may not be regularly engaging in clinical care, but they are going to be regularly engaging in their communities. And I think that doing something like a health fair, doing some sort of community event with Charlotte and her team would be a really incredible way to start that conversation, to deliver the patients to the clinicians. Because at the end of the day, we can educate as many clinicians as we want. We can keep going forever, but if the patients aren't getting to the clinicians, that education is not going to do much to help a community move forward and become healthier.
Thank you so much, Anna. Seems we have a question.
So we have one quick question. I know this happened again to us this morning. Is we are, as many industries are, we're an industry of acronyms, which many of us understand.
Oh, no.
We've been around for a while, but people are new. I understand. So somebody asked, "What is an RFP?" So maybe either Jill or Anna, you want to kind of explain briefly kind of what that term means in the sense in the sense of our world.
Sure. So an RFP, or request for proposal, can sometimes go by many different names, but request for proposal is usually the most common. Essentially what it is a specific supporter from the pharma industry will put out a request for proposal that outlines something that they want to do through funding, and people are invited to respond to that request for proposal. So it can be as broad as we're looking to do something in diabetes, or it can be as specific as we are looking to do a lunchtime satellite symposium at the American Academy for diabetes and et cetera. So it can be very loose, it can be very tight, and we as independent medical education companies are asked to submit ideas to that. So it's more competitive than your unsolicited grant requests, but it gives us the opportunity to engage in a collaborative group like this when we know that there's support available. And a lot of times we will know the general amount and range of funding that we can apply for.
Thanks so much, Anna. I would love if we could, so that the vision has been set, right, or has been offered. So, Bavel, if we could go to you next, as Anna shared, we would come to you as a trusted partner. And so then how would you take on the clinician and patient education components?
Right. So the first thing we would do with a collaboration such as this is, when Anna comes to us, we would brainstorm some formats and some ideas on how to reach those two separate audiences. Of course, we wouldn't get involved with content. We don't do that within the CME area, but we do brainstorm the kinds of things that HCPs might like to see or patients might find useful. With the patient group, we would be probably suggesting something like one of our swipers, which is sent on a phone, and it's just something easy, and it provides a little bit of information one screen at a time, and you use your thumb essentially to swipe through what we're all used to doing. Really simple and effective animations and graphics. And you could also disseminate that via social media or via QR codes at a health fair through Charlotte's group, for example. So very easy to disseminate and get hold of those patients who may not know the information they need to know to get to this place and talk to their HCPs. For HCPs, with the primary care as the audience, we would probably suggest something, as Anna mentioned, that cuts through the noise. So we would brainstorm ideas such as escape room, for example, or something like that, that is different, not something they may have seen before, something that can be taken online at their own leisure, but potentially also endured after a live activity. Lots of different ways of doing it, but we would come up with those kinds of ideas that cut through the noise, are engaging, and can provide some really good metrics and data at the end of it. So one thing we do is allow every single click and tap to be captured at the other end, and that provides some really great data for Anna and her group. In terms of video, Paul might be making in terms of patient voices or physician discussions and so on. We can integrate those into those types of formats as well. So we can work really nicely collaboratively with everyone here. And then also just to mention, we do look at kind of the audience you have. So if it is primary care and they are in need for an MOA, we would suggest something like a paced animation, perhaps, where one button kind of just explains one small step by step. The next button will then offer the next step, something very, very simple to get you through this very complicated MOA. And with that, you can also find the metrics at the back end and see just how far people went through this animation. Did they go through it all the way to the end? Is that it? And that's all just great data for Anna and her group.
Yes, indeed. And Bavel, I have to, the first time I witnessed or experienced infograph ed from this theme of behind the scenes, but I just, there was this gaming nature of it. Like it felt like I was going on a ride. And again, that sense of creativity and that humanity of like, it's fun to go on rides while we also, we're disseminating imperative information, but it's also identifying that it can be dynamic and it can be engaging and it can be, dare I say, fun.
Well, exactly. And again, that is stuff I have learned along the years from places like the New York Times and the Guardian. It is when I found that boring news articles could be made to really resonate and hit home. And I was like, wow, there is another way to do this. We don't just need slides and talking heads. There's other ways.
Yes. Thank you so much, Bavel. Paul, speaking of a sense of engaging with patients, let's put it this way: patients and clinicians or faculty as talent. How do you engage with them and make them sound good, look good? How does that all work on your end?
Well, I'll start out with I'll have a conversation with DKB team first to find out what we're making and what sort of assets we're going to be working with and who we're going to be talking to. And more often than not, I'll be involved in the recording of either the physicians or the patients, depending on schedule and what have you. But my job is to first of all make sure they look good and sound right, because if there are technical issues, then the message isn't going to get there. So it's a superficial thing, but it's very important to make sure that everyone's represented well. And in some cases with patients, we make a little extra effort, and because if we're telling a real story, then we'll look at sort of what kind of environment they're in and make sure we're filming them in a way that's going to really help us tell that story the best way we can. And then it's really, I mean, I'm really behind the scenes person. I'm in a workshop and I start collecting the goods. We get the recordings of doctors, their slides. We'll get recordings of patients. I'll transcribe everything, and then I'll start scraping up all the graphics and animations, whatever's out there, and start building something. And to speak to Baval's point, the job is not to recreate a slideshow. Where I'm always my agenda is to make something as top shelf, professional, and contemporary as we can, so that DKB becomes sort of like a leader in that field, and that's really the idea. So I am also looking at what's happening out there in the TV, film, theater world, animation world, social world, to see what people are going to expect to see, because they expect to see everything they see outside of CME. They're being sort of swamped with media from all angles. So you got to be in step with that. So that's the superficial stuff. And then, but the most important thing is that, especially with patient interviews, is we'll get a lot of it. We'll get, sometimes almost an hour per patient for a 3-minute video. So then it's a distillation process, is taking that material, we'll call it, and trying to blend the story together. And we'll be talking maybe in 3 or 4 different segments about, we're talking about whatever, some medication they're taking, or the reaction, or stigma is a big, something we talk about a lot. And we touch on those, and I try to weave those stories together so everybody has a voice. And they're all telling their story, and it's a story told respectfully and in a way that communicates the idea as seamlessly as possible in a much shorter sort of time frame than we started out with. And we're looking at 3 hours of raw material. We're going to boil it down to 12 minutes at best. So that's my job, and I try to then do the storytelling part of that, and then put it into a universe that can be easily accessed and be something that people can really sink into without being distracted by something that doesn't feel right or play right. So that's what I do.
Thanks so much, Paul. Thank you. And I feel like what's so important, many ways of what's important about your perspective. But I feel like in this digital age, it reminds me of when professional photographers share about, everyone can be a photographer with an iPhone, right? But the thing is that there are professionals where this is their art and this is their craft, and your art and craft is revealing stories. And there's something incredibly imperative about that to, again, make the CME that we are providing be dynamic and engaging. And that comes from someone like you who has that expertise, and can also see why we're collaborating with other folks who are coming to CME with outside perspectives.
So. Yeah, not that we don't get a lot of media with people that they shot themselves with their phones or their iPads, or that comes in all the time. The trick is to bring it in and make it fit into the rest, because we're not shy about that. I'll take you can shoot it on the smallest, tiniest phone you want. We'll make it look good.
And you know what, Paul, thank you so much for that too, because I feel like, again, back to the inclusivity. And so especially with patients, is being able to bring in, if you can shoot it on your iPhone, that is helpful for you to be able to take it and shape it. And so thank you. So speaking of engaging with patients and or prospective patients, and also engaging with the clinicians, Charlotte, Anna had mentioned a health fair. How do we, and then also with the digital components, how do you usually put those into play?
Okay, so one, I think, key component here is really engagement, community engagement. And I believe Rob talked and Anna talked about really the underserved, those communities that you can't reach, those populations. So two components of here is one, partner with an organization. To really have a comprehensive healthcare. So not only do you want them to come to learn for this particular program, diabetes, about diabetes. So taking that information, being able to put into that QR code. So number one, they understand it, but then also getting them to trust what you're saying. So that's where we talk about partnering with your churches and having your clergy, because you do have members in those underserved communities or just in the communities that really have a distrust. So you want to take away that medical distrust. And one way we partner is with Dr. Corey Aber. He's one of the well-known doctors here in New Orleans. You see him on TV. They see him on WDSU for medical hours. So you partner with them to educate clergy, to educate them so they be able to tell their practitioners, their members about these programs. So one, you got to educate them so they can do that, to make your health fair, number one, trustworthy, but then also comprehensive. So taking all those components, putting them together, having those real life stories, showing those different components, pulling them together, that also creates the way for them to, number one, be like, okay, I can trust this health fair. This is just not another health fair in a community, right? This is just not another event where they're putting something together to get, most time people think you're trying to get some information or something from them. You want them to be able to come here to trust that what education they're getting from you is value. So putting that health fair together, number one, training your clergy, training them. So number one, they can continue to go back and educate their members, because it's not just about that spiritual component, but you also want your members to be healthy, right? Both health wise. So that's important for them to understand those portions of these programs, to be able to also give that information back. So connection for the health fair really is when you partner with these organizations like Action or LCMC, which is one of the big ones here. Both of those, having them on site to be able to, number one, do any type of scans, be able to provide diabetes outreach right then and there, having nutritionists. So partnering with other organizations to have there. So really at that health fair, they're getting a comprehensive overview of their health screen that can actually be taken care of right then and there. So whether they're screened for that diabetes, whether it's eating habits, having all those different components. And one way I talked about for our healthcare when we did with DKB, we were able to partner with our local parish who brought in other resources, our council person who brought in other resources, who reached out to the schools, to those underpopulation there in the school system, to also have their parents come, because, diabetes is, it doesn't have an age, it doesn't discriminate. So, you're going to have these kids or young people. So we were able to just really bring all those pieces together, have a comprehensive health fair, and reach that community, both under having our school system involved, having our local community involved, actually having clergy, a priesthood, just all kinds of people coming together, being educated, being able to take this information, go back into their churches and their different organizations and be able to do that. And then also having a connection, being in a health system, able to put DKB, other people that they work with on organizations together to connect so that we can be at the forefront to help these communities. And then like one of our initiatives is for the state of, it's called Healthy State. And we want to be a healthy Louisiana. So we want to be in the top 40. So one way we can do that is partnering with DKB, educating our resources, educating our community to help us be healthy in the state of Louisiana, because we have good food, so we eat, so we don't always get those, that healthiness. So this is a real good way that we're out there being, hey, we can make these resources come together during these health fairs.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. It's a balance, right? And it just occurred to me, this is a little off script, but it occurred to me the sense of we're speaking to visioning, to developing or designing, and then to engaging. It makes me think about how do we then share that with supporters, right? So we've created this experience. We've gone through the journey together as collaborators. And so I'm, and please forgive me, panelists, for throwing this, but I'm just sitting listening and organically going, how do we then continue the story and the engagement and the humanity with those supporters who are helping make it possible? So I wonder about that part.
So that is actually a really fascinating question, and it's evolved over the years because, years ago we would try to do these patient outreach programs, and I just don't think that the CME landscape was there yet. They weren't ready yet, but I think now so many supporters are really leaning into that. They're really leaning into the patient engagement component. They're really leaning into the patient outcomes component to the extent that we can through electronic health records or claims data, really being able to show how and that we have moved the needle in terms of patient engagement, in terms of patient outcomes is really fantastic. But also bringing both patient-related outcomes and qualitative outcomes to our presentations when we are handing these off to supporters. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to give them the best tools that they can have to move forward with explaining the value of CME to their stakeholders. And I think that that's one of the ways that we can really bring people like Bavel and her team through to be able to show in a very dynamic way the way that we're making those changes, and bringing Charlotte and her team through, and even Paul, to be able to show these patients, show them from a video perspective of telling their stories, and then also being able to show how we're reaching patients in communities that may have otherwise been missed. And if we can do that and we can put that into our outcomes, and we can show how that clinician education is linked to patient education and patient outreach and overall patient outcomes through clinician practice change, I think that that really is the basis, the foundation of the value of CME.
Thanks, Hannah.
I think also collaboration as well. I think continuing collaboration is so important. I think you get to the point where you now see, a physician can't do this alone, right? We can't do this alone. We all need each other to really bring everything together. And to Anna's point, reaching those underserved, there's only one of me. I can't reach everyone. So we need to bring everyone in, the barbers, where some people spend most of their time, the hair salons, the hairstylists, this, that, bringing all those groups together and educating them on these things, because those conversations can lead to, wait, this person did this. Wait, this is what you saw from this program. So it leads to just overall collaboration, knowing that you can't just do it alone and just depending on those health systems to do it alone.
Yeah, incredibly important. Super important. In the same way that physicians can't do everything, MECs can't do everything. So in order to reach out to people whose specific expertise is in these various areas, you really get the best possible program through that collaborative effort.
And from our perspective, we can help make those communications back to the supporter look good. Maybe linked to the original program to make them compelling to look, to read eventually. So that's kind of where we can step in as well.
Here. I think during our rehearsal, Bavel, I had shared too that there's a database that has been created for InfographEd for those of us who are looking for the metrics. And so to be able to, again, that visual of going in, and it's not just numbers, there's a visual representation of the impact. So that's also, ongoing collaboration at all different parts of the journey. So as a PM, that's also really helpful for me to be able to log on and go, oh, I see it. Yes. And I feel connected to it. And then that's how I can continue moving it forward.
Exactly. The real-time dashboard of metrics and showing your numbers and clicks and how far along everyone's getting, just when you need it. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. We have another ARS question, our last one, which will bring us into the third act of our and final act of our conversation. Which one of these collaboration methods for developing CME most resonates with you? So we've heard about a variety of them in our almost hour together. So we're intrigued by what folks are looking at. or maybe not. All right, here they go. Reimagining. That reminds me of our conversations. And again, I recognize that all of these are useful methods, but it's always great to see how people are coming to it. Great. Yeah, excellent. Thanks so much. Okay, so our final question here. We've been hearing about various ways of collaborating, and so my last question to all of you is: what are your if you haven't mentioned it already, what are some of your favorite ways of collaborating to develop CME programs? Is there anything that you have yet to mention of your ways of creating and doing? And it can again be outside of CME that's informed your work in CME.
I used to, time used to be something we had more of, I feel like. And in those days, I used to enjoy the iterative process of, designing and brainstorming. I think that has become less and less over time, but those were one of my favorite ways to collaborate for sure. Coming up with ideas together with a mech. One example that comes to mind is a puzzle that we did for an MOA one time, and we worked together to come up with an idea where instead of it just being a six-piece puzzle, it was actually more about earning the puzzle pieces as a result of answering certain questions.
Oh.
And then you can put your six-piece puzzle together. But that was a fun project because the back and forth and the discussion, we felt like we built it collaboratively together. Those are my favorite ones. I wish I could do more of those.
Thanks so much for sharing.
I'd say I'll jump in there. When we were doing our COVID CMEs, which were doctor to doctor, that was particularly sort of exciting process because we were so much on the front edge of the medical treatments that were happening as they were happening minute by minute, and we were trying to help doctors sort their way through this during the pandemic. And to be kind of riding shotgun during that process was pretty exciting and interesting. And I was hearing things in our programs that I had yet to hear sort of in the news. So I found that to be particularly to be sort of at the front end of these developments, I think is probably the most exciting part of it.
Yeah, just jumping off of what Paul said with that, the COVID during the pandemic, that was really one of just a really incredible example of the CME community coming together to do something for the right reasons. For me, we had, and this is a little bit of a shout out to Michael Lemon and Michelle Skidmore, because both of them reached out to us and said, "Hey, we want to do this. We will," because we didn't have any funding. When we started our first COVID program, we had no funding, and they said, "We'll do this. We don't care. Let's just get it going." Our faculty member, Dr. Paul Awater, also was like, we just need to get this information out. And we were really uniquely positioned in a way to be able to do that. And I think especially with our collaborations, and Paul was such an integral part of that, being able to tell these stories and being able to bring this information, bring these webcasts to clinicians who were just absolutely desperate for the information, right? Mm-hmm. Because there wasn't at the time an organized way to deliver that through the more traditional channels that they were used to, just because the healthcare system, the healthcare industry moves as kind of this slow behemoth monster. And we, as this little teeny company, were able to be nimble and agile and be able to do that. But again, the only way that we were able to do that was through these collaborations, through partners we've been working with for a long time. And we ended up expanding our COVID library over time to include a lot of different groups, but really being able to lean on those partners and lean on people within the industry and outside of the industry to deliver this information, I think at the end of the day, gave us the ability to at least say that we have used our powers for good.
And just to close it out, I just think what's really, really important is just seeing how everyone's reaching across the aisle just to make everyone healthy, doing their part to just bring awareness to all types of disease states, this, that, anything that may be going on. So I think just reaching across the aisle, partnership across the board, thinking outside of the box, being unique about how we do this, I think has been the most rewarding. And then seeing those people leave there with the proper care they need, with resources they need, with things that they didn't know wasn't available. I think one of the joys that came out of this was that for my community and my church ministry, we were able to create a Uber drive where we heard at the health fair, a lot of people like, I can't get to my primary care. I can't get to my doctor. I have no way of getting there. So we were able to just take donations and make where they can call us Monday through Friday if they need a ride to their primary care, and we pay for those drives, those rides there. So I think that's one of the things, is taking things that we didn't ever think about and making a unique opportunity to make sure these people get the care that they need constantly, where we didn't know there was an issue with them being able to get there. There was no bus or bus route, or the bus route takes too long, or, they can't stand in the heat and out here in this Louisiana heat. So just different things that kind of open the door to other opportunities to be able to serve differently.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Thank you all so much for your thoughts on ways to collaborate. Scott, are there any questions?
We don't have any currently in the queue.
Okay.
But we're right about a little after 15 minutes after the hour, and I know probably on the East Coast people are probably packing up to go home for the day. So I'll wrap this session up.
Okay, great.
So for people who are watching either the live or the recorded version of this, we have a brief survey at the bottom of our live page, so you can go and answer a few questions that'll help us plan for the future topics that people want to hear about. Otherwise, I will bring on my special guest, Mr. Warnick, joining us here. There is no next session. So for people who are watching, CME Palooza Fall will be back in October. We will take a brief hiatus here for the next couple months, but then we will be back with lots more information about CME Palooza Fall coming up in October. This was another successful day. I'm sure we'll be kind of going over the metrics here shortly, but I know that we smashed our records for attendance once again for CME Palooza Spring, which is great. We had a wonderful day of panelists, a lot of diversity amongst our sessions, lots of different ideas, lots of entertainment. So anything you'd like to add, Derek? And ladies and gentlemen, he is on mute. He has only been doing this for 10 years. You'd think he would know how this is done. Let me ask you again. Anything you'd like to add, Derek?
Just kidding. No. I came on off of mute to say no. No, I thought we had some really creative sessions this time. People really branched out and tried some unique things, which takes a lot of effort. So really appreciative of that. We also just today passed 1,000 subscribers for the blog. That's cool and kind of stunning that many people get emails with what we write into their system. So that's cool. But beyond that, great day. Great ending session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Bobble. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. And we will see everyone in a couple months.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you all so much.